The night sky over western Russia looked like it had grown thorns. First came the dull hiss of engines at the edge of hearing, then the meteors, hundreds of them, skimming low, threading between radar cones and searchlights. For the second night in a row, Ukraine sent a massed swarm of long-range drones across the border and far into the Russian rear. Moscow's defense ministry boasted of shooting down nearly 200 the second night and 251 the night before. Number is so big, they almost sound like a factory inventory. But factories, in fact, were the point. On October 7th, the war reached deep into the beating heart of Russia's war industry, and the message was as clear as the glow over Dzerzhinsk. The back line is no longer a safe line. Let's set the scene. On October 6th, Russia said its air defenses destroyed 251 incoming Ukrainian drones, one of the largest barrages to date, with 61 downed over the Black Sea and another headed toward Moscow. 24 hours later, Russia said nearly 200 more were intercepted in a second consecutive night of strikes. You don't need to be an air defense officer to do the math. That's roughly 450 intercepts claimed in 48 hours, a rate that strains batteries, crews, and, perhaps most crucially, nerves. Even if you chalk some of that up to wartime chest thumping, the scale is remarkable. Where did they hit? Start with Nizhny Novgorod Oblast, where the town of Dzerzhinsk hosts the YM Sverdlov explosives plant, an industrial dinosaur with modern teeth. On October 6, Ukraine's general staff said its drones struck the complex, igniting numerous explosions and fires. The factory's importance isn't just size, it's specialization. Defense analysts note Sverdlov is Russia's only major producer of the high explosives RDX and HMX, the chemical backbone of everything from artillery shells and glide bombs to ballistic missile warheads. If you're looking for a pressure point in the Russian arsenal, that's it. The next night kept the pressure on. Dzerzhinsk's governor reported 30 drones downed over the town's industrial zone, debris falling across enterprise grounds. Further south, the Voronezh region's governor said 17 drones were shot down, shattering windows at a local heating plant. Belgorod, eternally within reach of Ukrainian fire, lost power yet again for parts of the region, with officials counting more than 1,000 still without electricity after the latest wave. And in the Bryansk region, emergency authorities reported energy infrastructure damaged and multiple man-made fires. Local channels geolocated one strike to the Klintsy power station. This wasn't random harassment. It was a map of Russia's war economy lighting up like a switchboard. If you felt a ripple of déjà vu, you're not alone. BBC's open source unit flagged the attack as a mass event worth validating in real time, using heat signatures, video, and geolocation to trace what happened and where. This wasn't a ghost swarm or a social media mirage. It left corroborated footprints across multiple regions. And BBC monitoring, sifting through Russian and Ukrainian channels, captured how quickly these deep strikes turn into information war. Hometown governors calming residents, Ukrainian voices framing it as fair reciprocity after Russian barrages. Truth may be the first casualty, but evidence still leaves clues. Russia's line was familiar: we shot most of them down. Even if you take the claim at face value, it carries an unintended confession. If you're expending hundreds of interceptors and still showing damage, the attacker's math is working. Belgorod's rolling blackouts and closures told their own story. The Moscow Times chronicled malls shut, classes moved online, and the grim aftershock, a restorer killed by follow-on fire as crews tried to bring the lights back. Air defense can blunt the blade, it cannot keep the lights on alone. Ukraine, for its part, didn't just wink and nod. It said plainly that domestically produced weapons, missiles, and drones were used in these deep strikes, a vital political point. Homegrown systems carry no Western caveats, no range shackles. They can go where operational logic dictates. It's the clearest sign yet that Kyiv's long-range industrial base isn't a press conference prop. It's operational and scaling. Pair that with commanders publicly celebrating precision hits on oil terminals and ammunition depots, and you get the thesis for Ukraine's autumn strategy. Widen the battlefield, stretch the enemy, and make every kilometer of Russian rear feel the price of occupation. Let's talk tech. The poster child is the UJ-26 Beaver, a canard layout long-range loitering munition with a reported range on the order of 600 to 1,000 kilometers and a warhead around 20 kilograms. It's been photographed, launched from ramps, and filmed hitting high-value targets. Small warhead? Sure. Small price tag? Also yes. Which means you can send not one, but dozens to smother a defended site. Welcome to saturation economics. Then there's Lyuty, the heavyweight among Ukraine's long-range types. In recent weeks, Defense Express chronicled strikes credibly reaching 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers. Orsk, Kyryshi, and Tyumen, turning yesterday's "no way they can reach that" into today's plume on the horizon. That reach puts not just Western Russia, but the industrial belt beyond the Urals on notice. No, that doesn't mean every sortie lights up a refinery like a candle factory, but it does mean every plant manager from Tatarstan to Tyumen now checks the night sky before bed. And the target set is evolving. It's not only oil. Though refining remains Ukraine's favorite pressure lever, it's explosive synthesis, filling arsenals, and the logistics nodes that tie ammunition to frontline guns. Hitting the Sverdlov plant is not symbolic. It threatens to ripple through bomb-filling lines, glide bomb kits, and the replenishment curve for Russia's daily air campaign over the front. Disperse production all you like, but RDX and HMX supply chains don't grow on birch trees. If you're wondering how this fits into the long arc of deep strikes, rewind to Storm Shadow and ATACMS. Starting in 2023, UK-supplied Storm Shadows and France's Scalp forced Russia to push ships and SAMs back from Crimea's western littoral. Then, in 2024, Ukraine's first ATACMS forays hammered airfields and radars across occupied territory, and later, with loosened restrictions, inside Russia itself. Those were high-end scalpel blows, scarce, politically sensitive, devastating when they landed. The drone campaign is different, cheaper, denser, domestically scalable, and therefore repeatable. The scalpel hasn't gone away. Ukraine has added a swarm. ISW's running assessments frame it plainly. Ukraine is executing a sustained, long-range campaign against defense industry plants and energy nodes. And the effects are not just tactical, but macroeconomic. Refineries throttled, price spikes, and a Russian leadership forced to choose between guarding Belgorod's power substations or keeping S-300s near Avdiivka. The second-order effect is strategic indecision. Every launcher pulled home is a launcher not hunting GMLRS at the front. Now, let's take the drone operator's view. Call it Swarm Logic 101. A 20-kilogram warhead won't crater a blast-hardened bunker, but a packet of drones can shatter utilities, set off fires, slice comms cables, and, crucially, set off the sprinkler of Russian air defenses. Each drone provokes a radar emission, a missile shot, a shift in posture, a night of overtime. Every intercepted ticker on Telegram is also one interceptor gone, one crew exhausted, one radar inching toward maintenance. Even static damage matters. There's a reason Belgorod keeps going dark. A factory doesn't care if the hit was a direct strike or debris. Lost power is lost production. Russian messaging tried for two notes at once. Triumph, we downed most of them, and stoicism, no significant harm to industrial infrastructure. But local governors' posts painted a grittier picture. Windows blown out at a heat plant in Voronezh, fires in Bryansk, accidents and injuries in Dzerzhinsk. Even Rose Energoatom felt compelled to comment after a drone reportedly struck a cooling tower at Novo Voronezh's nuclear plant, insisting operations continued normally. No one wants a panic around nuclear sites, least of all the operator. But the fact the statement had to be made tells you what October 7th felt like inside Russia. From Kyiv, the tone mixed pride and pragmatism. These were Ukrainian-built weapons launched under Ukrainian command at Russian military-industrial targets. The strategic goal isn't shock and awe for its own sake. It's cumulative attrition. Deny explosives today, slow glide bomb production next month, and starve the nightly bomb line over Kharkiv by winter. And if striking a fuel terminal in Feodosia dries up a brigade's diesel long enough to miss a rotation at the front, that's not a headline, that's operational art. What about escalation? Moscow has floated the usual storm clouds. Loud warnings about Western missiles and saboteurs, dire hints about qualitatively new stages. One prominent official even spun the drone disruptions over Europe as theatre, a reminder of war's danger. This is classic reflexive control. Plant fear, frame the West as the escalator, and hope nerves fray before logistics do. But it's telling that Russia's main practical answer has been more air defense mobilization at home, an expensive, manpower-intensive game of whack-a-mole against airframes that often cost less than the missiles sent to kill them. On the ground, you can feel the doctrinal shift. 2023 to 24 was the age of the eloquent missile. Storm Shadow slashing docks, ATACMS salting airfields. 2025 is the age of the persistent swarm. Industrial drones with 1,000-kilometer legs, fired like salvos, night after night. It's not that one replaces the other. It's that saturation plus precision is a new kind of pressure. The drones are the weather, the missiles are the lightning. Together, they change the climate. There's propaganda value too, and both sides know it. In Ukraine, footage of deep strikes rallies donors and welders alike. Every hit on a refinery is a recruitment poster for the next crowd-funded batch. In Russia, the official narrative leans on interception counts as a measure of national steel. But propaganda has a tricky relationship with morale. If you tell people you shot down 251 drones on Monday and nearly 200 on Tuesday, what they hear, standing in a dark apartment in Belgorod, is that Wednesday might be another long night. Technically, Russia's air defenses are not failing. They're being overworked. Systems optimized for aircraft and cruise missiles now spend the graveyard shift chasing small, cheap, low-flying airframes. Even successful nights deplete magazines and reveal radar patterns to Ukrainian planners. And while Pantsires and S-300s tilt skyward, someone in a procurement office has to schedule the resupply and barrel change cycle. War is logistics with explosions attached, and drones are very good at creating the paperwork part. Small joke, big truth. Let's not sugarcoat the risks. A mass drone raid brushes close to critical infrastructure, power plants, refineries, even nuclear complexes. Operators on both sides know this. That's why nights like October 7th include a parallel information battle to tamp down panic. But risk isn't a one-way street. Strike fear in the Russian rear and you force the Kremlin to garrison its own inland. Guards at substations, mobile SAMs on factory roofs, security cordons around chemical plants. Every battalion babysitting a transformer is a battalion not rotating through Sverdlov. That's the arithmetic of a long war. Which brings us back to Dzerzhinsk. If Ukraine's aim is to slow the rate at which Russia can fill bombs and warheads, then hitting the node that synthesizes the explosives is a strategist's choice. The plant's resilience, earthworks, dispersion, a century of hardened Soviet industrial DNA, means one strike won't end production. But that's the point of a sustained campaign. Repeat, adapt, map weaknesses, and make every week a maintenance week. Remember, even Russia's own analysts concede that refinery and defense industry disruptions push prices and strain supply chains. War doesn't have to break the machine, it just has to keep it from running smoothly. So, how does this reshape 2025's battlefield? First, Ukraine's deep strike arm is no longer an exotic adjunct, it's core. Second, Russia's assumption of a safe interior has cracked. Governors issue nightly warnings, airports throttle flights, factories run the lights low. Third, the attritional logic is moving up the value chain, from fuel to explosives to complex components. You can watch this unfold in real time, courtesy of open source sleuths and BBC verified teams who now treat drone nights like meteor showers, with spreadsheets. The front line may be stable on a map, the war's geography is not. Humor me one more analogy. If 2022 was a sledgehammer and 2023 a scalpel, then 2025 is 1,000 sewing needles. Each puncture is annoying, 100 is debilitating, 1,000, and you start leaking in places that matter. Russia can show intercept counts and Ukraine can post fiery clips, but the sober measure is industrial tempo. tons of explosive cast, barrels of diesel refined, trains dispatched with ammunition to the front. That's where the October 7th raids live, far from the cameras, inside spreadsheets that decide whether tomorrow's glide bomb sortie lifts off on time. Finally, the psychology. There is a cost to waking up a superpower's hinterland 2 nights in a row. Fear spreads faster than damage. In Moscow, it's political. How to reassure citizens without admitting the rear is porous. In Kiev, it's galvanizing. Proof that domestic industry can project force across 1,000 kilometers, and that the war can be brought to the factories that feed it. It's also a reminder to the world that in this conflict, range is a currency, and drones are minting more of it every month. So the camera pulls back from Dzerzhinsk's sodium orange skyline. The swarm's engines fade. Fire crews hose the last hotspots. Somewhere in a Ukrainian workshop, a fresh fuselage comes off a jig, and a technician stamps a serial number. The new long-range strategy is not a thunderclap, it's a drumbeat, and October 7th was another beat in time. The point isn't to win the night, it's to change how Russia sleeps. And lately, the rear sleeps with one eye open.